Hello everybody, this is Professor Yogesh. Uh, Today we'll be discussing about the second exercise in Robotics Process Automation uh, lab. And the second exercise is to develop an automation in UiPath Studio X to demonstrate the activities like if activity, switch activity, repeat number of times, skip current and exit loop. Skip current and exit loop uh, in the tool that I am using, it will be called as current and the other one would be, sorry, it will be called as continue. The skip current will be called as continue, and the exit loop will be called as break. So coming to the theory part of it, so if statement or sorry, if activity allows you to check for a condition, and based on the result, it chooses a path the automation should follow. So it will check for if condition, and if it is true, then it will execute statements which follows the true path, and if it is not, then it follows the else path. Then we have something called switch, the switch activity. It allows you to define the multiple cases, and then based on the expression whatever we have given, it executes a single case. And if there are multiple cases that you have to mention under the switch statement, it can be mentioned in the switch activity. Next, we have repeat number of times activity. Suppose if you want to repeat one particular executions again and again, then we can go by repeat number of times. If you mention number of times that has to be repeated, then it will be executed with that many number of times. The only condition that we need to follow for repeat number of times is it should accompany if statement or skip current and the exit loop activity. So any one of these should be associated with the repeat number of times activity. Next, we have something called skip current. So this activity allows you to skip the current iteration in a repetitive activity. Uh, Suppose if the condition is true and if you want to execute that, that can be continued. Otherwise, you can skip that particular thing. Next, we have exit loop, which is a break activity, where it will allow you to terminate the repeating activity in the automation process. Now, coming to the conduction part, this is the demo document which I'm using to illustrate what exactly these activities are. The first one is if activity. To test the condition, first I have to input the data. So in order to input the data, I'm taking input dialog box. So this dialog title could be anything. I've just given some random data here, hellograce.com. It could be demo activity or anything else also that you can mention. So what I'm doing with if statement is I'm just checking the input number whether it is greater than or not. If it is greater than, it should display certain condition. If it is less than number 10, then it should display another condition. So for that I should input the number. So here the input label indicates to enter the number that we are supposed to test. And the input type could be a multiple choice or could be a text box. So I'm using a text box to take the input. In the last exercise, we have seen how multiple choices could be used. So here I'm using a text box. So where I can enter the number and that number will be tested for whatever condition it is. Then I'm using a variable called int my number. So this variable will store the number whatever we enter and that will be tested for certain conditions. So that is input dialog box. And in the in statement, so the condition block, it will have the int my number, the variable where it is storing the input data. So that is tested for greater than 10 condition. If the number is greater than 10, then it follows then block. Otherwise, it follows else block. So if the number is greater than 10, then entered number is greater than 10 is the message that has to be displayed. So I'm using a message box to display that. If it is else condition, then it should display the number is less than 10. So again for both, I'm using a message box. So this is the if activity. So the output could be something like this. Enter your number. If I'm entering 8, the number is less than 10. So that is what it has been displayed. Next comes switch activity. Again, for switch activity, we need the input to be prompted. So here I'm using an input dialog box again. So I'm using a dialog title as shopping. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a data from a customer. If the customer enters to a shop or a shopping mall where it has got 5 to 6 floors, so each floor it has been mentioned with one section. For example, grocery section, men's section, women's section, kids section, and game zone. So if a customer wants to go to a particular section, so it will ask for the customer's input. So that is what I'm illustrating here. So here the input label is, dear customer, which floor do you like to visit? Or do you like to go for shopping? So that is what I'm mentioning here. And then we have something called input type. In the last case, I've taken um, a text box. So here I'm taking a multiple choice. So remember, when we go with multiple choice, the choices should be given below that field. So we have something called input options. So each option should be separated by a semicolon. So that aggregates the multiple choices. So one, I'm mentioning grocery. Two, I'm mentioning men's section. Three, women's section. Four, kids section. And five, game zone. That is what the data which I've entered here. And I'm using a variable called uh, user choice to store the input data given by a customer. So that data will be displayed here by making use of a write line property. So after prompting the input, so if you go with a switch expression, so the expression is nothing but the data which has been given by the uh, customer here. So I'm just taking that data itself as the input data for switch expression. So I'm using user choice here, and then I'm going for a case statements. Case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I've used. One, I've mentioned grocery. So when the customer prompts grocery, so it should say that you need to go to ground floor. Then for men's section, you need to go to first floor. So these are the messages which I am displaying for each and every sections by making use of a case statement. Right, in the body of case statement, I am mentioning by making use of a message box. Right, I am mentioning food court, everything. Then we have something called default statement. So if customers have not prompted any input, so it says that you are in the parking area or in the ground floor. Choose the floor that you want to visit is the information that comes in the default case. So the output will go something like this. So dear customer, which floor do you like to go for shopping is the data that I'm asking. So these are the options that we get. So if one of the option is selected, then it will give the output in the message box right side. So you need to go to the fourth floor. So this is the output that comes with the switch statement. Next, we have something called repeat number of times activity. As I've already said, this activity will be associated with if statement or skip current or the exit loop. So you can see here the input has been given to the last exercise, whatever we have done here, the switch exercise. For that itself, I am using the repeat number of times here. So what I'm doing is I'm just repeating one statement 3 times. The statement is this is a RPA class and it will be displayed in a message box. So how many number of times it has to be displayed? So that you can mention here. I have mentioned 3 here. So for each of the current item is which is getting executed below this, repeat number of times activity. So the activity that is getting currently executed is the message box activity. So this statement will be displayed thrice. So this is number of times, repeat number of times activities. So this is what it comes. The output, if you can see the right side output. So this is RPA class, this is RPA class, this is RPA class. This is the statement which comes 3 times. Next we have skip current, which is also called as continue. Skip current continuous if a data is given here in the repeat number of times activity, you can mention that inside the do block as continue. So it will just skip that particular part and continues with the current execution. So no other statements will be executed. Then we have something called break or exit loop activity. If this statement need not be executed, for example, then we can use break statement. So it will break that particular iterations and it continues with the next exercise to be executed in series. So this is the output for the exercise, whatever I've discussed now. Now, if you go to the simulation part, so the simulation part is in the UI part tool, which I've already uh, executed here. So input dialog box, I have given the title as demo activity. There I've given some website address, yellowgrace.com, something like that. So here I've given demo activity. Then enter the number. I'm using a text box, and then int my number is the variable. And then if condition is used here, int my number greater than 10. If it is greater than 10, then this should be the message which has to be displayed in then block. Else it should go to else block, which is less than 10. Then I've used a repeat number of times before switch statement, because after switch statement, anyways, I have to put this particular condition. So I've initially mentioned this repeat number of times condition. So I've putting 2 times, which means the user has to enter his or her data twice. So because I'm mentioning that as a current item now. So inside the do block, I have to go with mentioning the data for the switch statements by making use of an input dialog box. So above that, I have used continue statement. So which means it breaks that particular statement and continues with the current execution. So input dialog box, as I've already discussed in the demo uh, document. So here I've mentioned all the choices, whichever I want to mention. In the switch statement again, so I've mentioned all the floor conditions: first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth and fifth floor. I've just taken 5 floors here. And in the default case, I've mentioned you are still in the ground floor. You select your floor to which you want to proceed further. So these are the activities which I've mentioned here. So I'll try to execute this now to see what could be the output. Now it is asking for the first activity, if activity. So the number to be displayed here. So I'm mentioning 5 as the number. It says entered number is less than 10. I'll click OK. So it is coming out of the loop because I've used continue statement here. So the switch statement is not taking because it skips that particular execution. So if I remove this now and go only with switch statement along with the current if statement, so you can see that it will follow the if activity now. So earlier case I have given the number less than 10. So now I'll give the number which is more than 10, 13. So it should display that the entered number is greater than 10. So it is displayed. So now it is asking because I have not used continue. So dear customer, which floor do you like to visit? So here there are the inputs that I've mentioned. So I'll go and select it section and I click OK. Right. And it is asking for one more time because I'm using repeat number of repeat number of times 2 times. Right. The number of times to be repeated is 2 here. So I'll select. So it is executing with the data whatever we have here. So if the repeat number of times is removed, so it will indicate to which section you are supposed to go. Now it is showing if you are in the ground floor, select your choice to move because I am mentioning the repeat number of times activity here before the uh, statement. switch statement, right? So this is what the application of if, switch, and so let me try with break statement. So if I include break here, so break is exit loop. So if I include break here, you can see that it will ask for the first data. I'll mention 6. It says the number is less than 10. I'll say OK. So it completes the execution because it is breaking the current execution. Right? Either break or continue can be used here in order to break the current repetitive executions. Right? This is the second activity that is there in the uh, lab component. And thank you.